Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is having a really good day. I'm sure a ton of you guys are currently working from home. I know I am. I just got back from out of country last week, and I'm in self-quarantine. And pretty much we all are now. But honestly, I'm really excited. Just chatted with our guests here today, and the most contact I've had with multiple people in a little while. So really happy to be here today. It's a full house, and really just wanted to share just a few quick things before starting out. I really just wanted to express how I felt in terms of the response to this, what's been going on with COVID. And here at Canada Helps, we've seen so many amazing charities responding in amazing ways and just showing such strength in the way that they're continuing to serve their community in such really uncertain times as we have here. Here at Canada Helps, we've really rallied and kind of flipped around completely the way that we've done work in a couple of days to be here for you. And we're really hoping that we're going to bring some value here today. But really all of this, the kind of trend is that with all the work that you guys are doing, the donors who are giving to food banks, it's all stuff that we're doing in service of others. And I think as we navigate this period, if we could really think about who we need to be in service of those that need us, I think that could really be a guiding compass. So I just wanted to start off with that. For those of you that might have joined through social media or through some other avenue and you're not new to Canada Helps, just wanted to give you a quick little insight into Canada Helps. So Canada Helps is a registered charity. We've been around for 20 years. We kind of operate on two planes. So on one side, for charities, we build online fundraising technology. We offer it at no upfront cost. And then we offer education for you to make the best use of that technology as well. So we really want all charities, regardless of size, regardless of resources, to be able to succeed in this increasingly digital age, even more so recently. And for Canadians, any Canadian can go to Canada Helps, donate to any single charity in Canada by a variety of payment methods and instantly get their tax receipts. We make it easy and we promote all charitable work there and do a ton of advocacy work as well. So over $1 billion has been raised through Canada Helps from 2 million Canadian donors. It's actually over 21,000 charities now use Canada Helps. So webinar reminders. Okay, so if you're having trouble hearing us, please turn up your computer's volume or you can go to the sound check under the audio panel. You're going to want to select that speaker tab and then turn the volume all the way to the right. For the best webinar experience, please close all those other applications so you don't get any slowdown. And yes, for those of you that might have to leave early or for other reasons, we're going to send the slides over so you can send them out to your team or maybe your board. The slides and the video are going to be available to you within 24 hours. And for folks that maybe aren't here, they'll be able to get access to that too. So just a quick reminder, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have questions, and I would even suggest, so we've got hundreds of questions kind of that have been asked in the sign-up process, but if you have questions, you can even start typing this in now. As you guys know, this is largely going to be a question and answer period with some really great folks. Also, about continuing the conversation, so for those of you that right now want to chat about this while we're online here, you can tweet at us at Charity Life Canada CA. And also wanted to announce after this or throughout this and moving forward, we had planned to launch a Facebook group, just really give a place for Canadian charities to gather and talk digital, talk online fundraising, share those best practices where you guys need some help. So just wanted to let you know, we did move up the launch of that. Given all of this, we thought it would be a great space for people to connect. So you can find us on Facebook at Canadian Charities Connect. After this, I'm sure with all these great guests, there's going to be a ton of food for thought. You can go there and continue that conversation as well. So here's our panel, guys. Honestly, it makes me a little emotional to know that all of these amazing people on really such short notice gave almost 2 hours of their time, including before. If you guys didn't know, we've extended this session due to demand and the questions we got in for an hour and a half. So we're going to be going till 4:30 Eastern. And these are all just amazing people, and kind of talking at the beginning, this is all in service of you guys, in service of sector, in service of community. And so all these 5 people came together to help us out today. Being a part of a charity myself and on a board, I have my notes here ready, and I can't wait to take some of this back. And so rather than introducing all these people myself, we're gonna get them. We're gonna hear from them themselves. They're gonna introduce themselves, and also before we dive into the questions, we're really just gonna hear what are their key messages. What are the things they think are really important for us to take home during this uncertain time. And I think we're gonna start with Cathy.
All right, can you hear me? Now the challenge is, how do you see me? Oh, now it was so easy. It was so easy before. Oh, now I've lost you entirely. Might have to start with somebody else, folks.
It worked in rehearsal.
Oh, wait a minute.
I just sent you a request, Cathy.
Webcam. Woohoo! Can you see me?
Yay!
Okay, can you see me?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. There we go. All right. Well, I just thought I would start like that so that everybody else is going to look like a pro. All right. I'm Cathy Mann. I'm not going to really talk about myself. If you want to learn more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter and my website. First of all, I want to thank Canada Helps for pulling this together so quickly, and thanks to my co-panelists for sharing their time and expertise today. You'll see on the slide what it says. These are extraordinary times, and we're being asked to be extraordinary in response. And I really believe that, and I just want to tell you a couple stories because that's what I do. I've posted a couple videos to social media recently, and one was my top 5 things to do in response to COVID, and one was more about resilience and how we're being asked to step up right now. And if you want to see them, you can find them on the fundraisinglab.ca's website in the blog section. In the second one, I talked about my parents and what they endured during their lives. They lived through the Depression, they lived through World War II, and then there was this period of relative calm for about 70 years in the Western world. And now the world is topsy-turvy again. We've got wildfires, storms, income inequality, and a similar kind of political unrest that we saw before World War II. So yes, these are extraordinary times, and yes, we are being I hear a lot of people talk about worry about failure. And when I dig deeper, I realize that they're not really talking about failure, they're talking about mistakes. So here's another piece of advice. Do not equate mistakes with failure. And I think this is a hugely important thing for you to be thinking about right now. I don't believe I have ever failed at anything except for calculus. But I try not to think about that. I have had to everyone I spoke with. They weren't all good ideas. Some of them were good. Some of them were off the mark, but they sparked other ideas that will emerge into good ideas. We're being called upon to be extraordinary right now, but extraordinary is not being the most brilliant or the most clever. It's about showing up, and it's about trying new things. You know, Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Now, maybe it wasn't Einstein. It doesn't matter. Some smart guy said that. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Hey, can you hear me all right? Great. Well, thanks also for giving me the opportunity to share today. Also for the motivation to get up and shower, shave, and be a human being again after 3 days in like sweatpants and other scary things. You know, I think we're all kind of feeling in that way in some ways, you know, quarantined, but also small in a box of our organizations. And we have to remember that when people think of community in our organizations are who they turn to. So people are turning to us at this time now more than ever, as Cathy shared as well. So the team asked me to just share a couple things. And as you may know, Paul Nazareth with the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, formerly of Canada Helps. And, you know, again, part of it is we think about how people interact. And very often, in fact, a lot of what our organizations do is talk a lot about how, when there's never more important time than right now for us to get really focused on our why. My first thought here is that as much as our organization is often framed in need, and in going through some of the questions today, and I spoke to dozens of fundraising colleagues before today's discussion over the past couple of days, and one of the challenges is so much of what we do is fundraising, is appeals, even in our special events, it's us talking about our organizations. And in fact, now, again, people are seeking for meaning, spending time with family and friends, and having that taken away, we get asked these questions. So now is the time people will be thinking about what they believe, and a lot of our organizations are connected to the DNA of our donors. Speaking of being connected to donors, my second last one is just about the concept, and we have the data on this. Data from our colleague Penelope Burke with Cygnus Research, from our colleagues the Association of Fundraising Professionals with What Canadian Donors Want, and a previous unpacking of our colleagues like Fraser Green Goodworks, Amelia Eustace, and a lot of our marketing colleagues who have looked at the last recession, who looked at previous global crises, and when cash disappears, know that people need to be talking about why they're being connected with you. And frankly, the bequest conversation is an active stewardship conversation because they're talking about giving when they can't necessarily give right now. So this is one of the things we've seen in research that people actually default to. It becomes a holding pattern until we can talk about those other kinds of giving again. And then most importantly, in crisis, we turn to people. We're humans. We need to be human. We need to connect with people. There has never been more an important time to double down on stewardship. Thinking about how we can do it, I've been listening over the past couple of days and watching charities pivot to that virtual, pivot to the connectivity. You know, I don't know how many of you have been trying to maybe think about connect with your donors over this kind of a channel for a long time. My donors wouldn't say yes to FaceTime and Zoom. And all of a sudden, we live in a Zoom world, front cover of the New York Times today. And of course, that's why everybody who's trying to do conference calls with their staff can't get through because every conference line has suddenly gone up 3,000%. People are seeking connection. And donors are saying, you know, I was online with a donor. I'm on the board of 3 or 4 charities and different advisory groups. I was talking to a donor just the other day, and they were talking about the fact that they have heard, and I'm sure all of you have gotten 80,000 COVID emails from every company you have ever interacted with. I ate a stick of gum in 1987, and Doublemint sent me a COVID email yesterday. Well, all of us are getting all of these things. And who's connecting as a person? We're here for you. Are you here for the community? What do you think about this time? We're not doing that as much as we could. And if we do, and if we double down on stewardship, make no mistake, the donors will be with us. Well, that's me for now. Look forward to more questions. Thanks, Jacob, and thanks, Canada Helps, for the opportunity to be in community at this time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. I have, for both Cathy and you, a bunch of my own questions that maybe I can be selfish and pretend they're from the community. But so next we have our own in-house expert that I'm happy to introduce, Angela. Hello. Looks like
Hi, I lead marketing at Canada Helps, Angela Kasenko, so I'm going to be a little less inspirational than both Paul and Pat. And can you hear me, Jacob? Are you not able to hear me? Oh, okay, sorry. So I'm going to be a little less inspirational and a little more tactical in the items that I'm going to talk about. So I live and breathe digital marketing, digital fundraising. My role here at Canada Helps is really essential to working with both donors as well as trying to give charities the resources they need. So during these uncertain times, I would really focus on 2 areas of digital fundraising. I think at this point, we all know that people are self-isolating, they're at home a lot more, they're working really hard to help reduce the spread. They're going to be online a lot more than they used to be. Previous to this, we've already seen online giving is actually growing 3 times faster than overall giving, and I think that trend is just going to be spiked by everything that we're seeing and experiencing right now. So my advice to charities who are tuning in is twofold. Really start with covering the basics. If you don't already, make it as easy as possible to give on your website. Do you have a donate button in the top right corner of your site? Is it on every single page? Make sure your ways to give page covers all of the ways that a donor can give to you. Don't send your donor to another site. If you can, keep them on your site. Embed a donation form. You don't want them to get distracted and go somewhere else. If you have control, try not to ask them too many questions when they're donating. Ask them just the bare minimum to keep them engaged and reduce friction. So make it as easy as possible. Connected to that is around the next point, which is around optimizing for mobile. Mobile giving is growing much faster than desktop giving. And last year, we saw 1 out of every $5 raised on Canada Helps was by someone using a mobile device. And I think that number is just going to keep increasing every year. Again, especially with COVID, with people being on tablets, with people being on phones in front of their TVs as they're watching the news, they're going to more and more be trying to give on mobile. So that's part of making it easy for them to find your site, making it easy for them to find out about you and consume information, but make sure your donation page or donation form works from mobile as well. And really, the next two items is push monthly. I really think that's going to be critical for people that are a little nervous about giving a large donation. I think they're going to be a little more comfortable if you can ask them for a small ask, and this is incredibly easy to do, incredibly easy to sign up online. So it's super easy. And also use all your digital channels to really keep communicating. It is the basic, don't stop. I'll also say don't stop asking. Don't stop telling them what you're doing, what you're working on. Definitely, we're going to see some people respond in the face of potential recession and be a little bit more nervous about giving, a little bit nervous about spending, but there's going to be a core group of people out there who are going to still be moved to support you. This is a time when many of us are feeling helpless, and they're going to be driven to do whatever they can to make a difference, even if it's, if it's setting up a monthly gift or if it's making a donation. So make sure you're communicating. The next 3 points, how creative they are depends on who you are, but I'll say to leverage social media. If you're not already, make sure you're there, but if you are, try picking up your cadence, try posting more frequently, try new things. Consider live streaming, consider a Twitter chat, consider just asking questions on your social if you haven't done that before. Connect with your donors and ask them how they're doing. Post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter, and while you're at it, tell them how you're doing. Humanize your channel if you can. I'd say try to turn your supporters into virtual fundraisers. There's a lot of platforms out there that make it easy for donors to give, and then platforms that layer on top of that makes it easy for your donors to turn into fundraisers as well. Connected to that, I'd say in the realm of creativity and probably the
knowing our value, knowing who our audience is. None of our sponsors bought these gold, silver, bronze packages, which we really should not be doing at all anyway, but in this case, they were all custom. It was easier for us to offer our sponsors the same outcomes that they wanted from being at our event. And that's really the lesson learned here, is that the best way to practice sponsorship and to prevent these outcomes or these experiences in the future is to know your audience, then have a conversation with your sponsor based on a real valuation of your opportunities to achieve the same goal outcomes for those sponsors. In some cases, your sponsors are going to move on, which is why it's so very important that you talk to your lawyer first and your accountant. And if you have a venue, you must nail down the venue issue early on, because that could be a costly one. So I'll get more into these concepts when we do our Q&A, but that is sort of the overview of what I would call the extreme pain that I went through over the last 10 days or so with my business partner.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks so much. Yeah, there's a ton in there to unpack and a ton of value in there, and looking forward to, I know just looking at the questions already, there's a ton of questions about sponsorships and events. So I'm sure people are waiting to dig their claws in you, as they say. I'm going to turn it over to last but certainly not least.
Hey, everyone. Jacob, you disappeared. So no one's there to give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Can anyone just say I can hear you?
Can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you.
All good.
Okay, thank you.
We can hear you.
Awesome. Now, thanks, Paul. I'm actually first I want to start with, I'm sure most people have heard this Fred Rogers quote, which is, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And I want to start by acknowledging that you all are the helpers. Our sector, that is the nature of our work and what we do. And sometimes it's hard to get help as the helper. And thank you for Canada Helps for organizing this webinar, and to the rest of the panelists who are all offering our support to you during this time. So thank you for your work. It is critical to our sector. I'm wondering if I can ask a question in the chat. I don't know if I'll see responses, but I'm curious to know how many people you have fundraising in your organization as dedicated fundraisers. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. If you can answer that in the chat and make sure it goes to the organizers and panelists, I will see. I just want to know one. Awesome. I don't know if I'm going to see all the answers, but I want to make sure that this is relevant to your situation. I'm going to assume that most people are small organizations. Okay, here we go, a couple. 0, 2, 1. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, Terry, Jen. So 0 to 2 is what I'm seeing so far. And I think in my experience working with smaller organizations, what's happening now is we're being thrust into a zone that's uncomfortable for us. So there are certain things that we have usually avoid in the organizations that I've seen. Oftentimes it's systems and technology, and we're faced right now with the obligation really to figure out ways to work remotely and cloud-based and collaborate. But also with fundraising. I've seen a lot of organizations, small organizations, whether it's staff or board, there's so many people who are reluctant fundraisers, who don't feel comfortable fundraising, who call it icky or uncomfortable or like it's begging. And right now, the people who feel that way and who aren't doing work to overcome that, their organizations are in jeopardy. So fundraising is one of those things, let's call it the cleaning of our hands. Very full plates. So now really is the time to think about, I mean, we don't have a choice. How are we going to create the systems where we can do our work remotely, collaborate with other people, not rely on high overhead things like offices if that's appropriate. So the conversation is here whether we like it or not, and it's scary because a lot of people don't know tech, they don't like tech, it's overwhelming, but there are resources that make it really, really simple and straightforward. I just want to end on that note of generosity. I know Cathy mentioned she's been offering 30-minute calls. We have as well. I know Paul and Chris are both incredibly generous in the sector, and I urge all of you to reach out to any one of us. Sorry, everyone, I'm offering up your time on your behalf, but you know, now is the time to reach out and take the steps to move forward, and you don't have to do that alone. We have an online program that we run to teach fundraising, and we thought about delaying it because of, you know, things are hard for charities right now. Instead, we decided to go ahead with it but offer scholarships. So if anyone wants information about that, it's flipside.thegoodpartnership.com/scholarship, and you can apply. It's a really quick application. But if you want to take your fundraising up a notch, we want to help you. That's it from me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cindy. So I think working from in self-quarantine here and others around, we might be having a couple audio issues, and I guess this is just adjusting to the new norm, where typically we'd all be at the Canada Health's office potentially doing this together. So for everyone there, I appreciate your patience for any of those little hiccups. And I see a ton of questions coming in. I have a ton of my own too, but I'll leave that to all of you guys. I think now we're going to ask all of our guests here to turn on those cameras back on so we could all kind of do a little roundtable discussion. And so there's a ton of questions here, a lot of stuff coming up here in spring with events and sponsorship and direct mails coming in. But I think kind of just as a level set before starting, Cathy, I'd love to start with you before getting into that. And really just the question here that we've got is, are there any lessons learned from previous
I lost you, Jacob, but I think the question is, are there any lessons learned from previous recessions that we can think about in times ahead? Does that sound right? Give me a thumbs up if that's right, Jacob.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know if you could hear me, but that's the one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that, I think that, you know, one of the things we all need to realize is that this is a new formula. In the past, in the last 20 years, the things that have faced us have been things like the market crashing during the dot-com bubble, SARS, H1N1, and then the mortgage crisis of 2008 that crashed the market. Those were financial, or they were
want to push your events out pretty far. But nevertheless, if you're in new business mode right now, I think you're going to hit a lot of roadblocks. And so I would be focused on existing relationships and retaining sponsors. You know, a penny saved is a penny earned. So we managed to retain 100% of our sponsors from our event, and we have stopped completely reaching out to others. And the same is true for all of our clients. So the question, though, is actually around outreach, right? Should we be reaching out to sponsors? Because it feels like we're doing something. The problem with outreach, though, is that it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the revenue. What could happen is you get a no thanks, and it's a permanent no, because the corporation just can't handle the request right now, or come back in 6 months when we've sorted things out. And so it could actually be delaying things. So, you know, while it feels like you're doing more by doing perhaps cold outreach or reaching out to new businesses, it's very unlikely you're going to get very far. So I would say if you're 90% of the way, 80% of the way through an ask, through building a custom sponsorship package, you might be okay to close that. But I would not recommend right now the typical 5 to 10 cold calls a day and trying to do discovery. I think companies are full of people just like us, and we're all losing it here in a way, right? We're so overwhelmed. The same is true of our colleagues who have the money. So I think we need to give them some space. However, just like Cathy says, never make assumptions on behalf of your donors. Never make assumptions on behalf of your sponsors. This is what my intuition tells me. This is the approach we're taking. Test it. Talk to a couple of folks, and if they're clearly unhappy with the fact that you're soliciting them, then that's your sample.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, and I guess too so that's for, I guess, events with postponing, we're thinking out into the fall, but a lot of people had these events now in the spring. And I think there's been a lot going around along making these virtual, how can we still keep these going? And I think, Angela, you touched on that in your opening slide. And there's a question right here. What are some creative virtual events?
Yeah. I saw that was one of the more popular questions from people who were signing up for the webinar as well. So some things are going to be relatively easy to transfer online that you may have had an offline model for, and that's things like your silent auction, there's software that helps you with that, there's online raffles. None of that's off the table, so I'll kind of skip over those because they're actually fairly easy. You can give it a Google and find some tools that will help you with that. But there's some more creative ideas. So there's definitely, if you want something more like a typical event, live streaming is a great option, especially if you have some kind of entertainment that you can offer. They can come to a room. We can all be you can have a small team self-isolating and putting this on. But if there's talent to share, whether it's a local celebrity or a comedian or a musician, there's those opportunities. You can sell tickets to those just the same. I think some of the interesting things that I've started to hear about and that I want to get people to think about are things that are more around peer-to-peer fundraising and how you can layer that on virtually. It's already very well suited to being virtual. Someone asked what P2P stands for, and that's just peer-to-peer fundraising. That's working with your supporters, your donors, and asking them to fundraise on your behalf. So you can create events very creatively that can be handled with technology. I've heard people, I saw a really interesting idea, this idea of a virtual dance-a-thon. It is kind of crazy, it's kind of silly, but it could really work. If you have a couple of people, again, that you've recruited, they can be dancing in a self-isolated place, and you're challenging your donors to raise money for you with this promise that they're going to outlast, or they're going to dance for 3 hours straight, or it's similar to taking that 5K peer-to-peer run and taking it indoors. I've seen people talk about things like virtual challenges. So, I mean, one of the common ones that most of us have heard about is the Ice Bucket Challenge, but I've also seen and heard people talking about things like, for every $10 I raise, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. I'm going to read 1 book. I'm going to do that. I've seen a couple of really interesting individuals trying to try different things. I've seen a board game-a-thon. I promise to play board games for 24 hours, and these people that I know that do this raise thousands of dollars by doing this each year, and they choose to direct that to sick kids. But you can engage with your donors if there's something that works with your charity in that way as well. But I'd say whatever you try to turn virtual, try to give them some kind of an in-person element. This may be a little outside some of our ability, but I've seen people suggest things like, see if you can send them a bottle of wine at home, those sorts of things. But I would say if you're trying any of these virtual at-home, dance-a-thons, board game-a-thons, those sorts of things, you can consider mailing them a t-shirt if they meet their minimum donation, the same way you would give it out in person if it was a 5K run. But there's options to engage with your donors through technology, and that's through video, that's through voice, it's all very doable. And having those creative ideas is really what it'll take.
And so we're getting a ton of questions directed at you here, with no surprise. And so the one I'll pick out here is, how can we continue to solicit planned giving during these uncertain times where people have a heightened fear of mortality?
Muted.
Great. Thanks. So absolutely. And in fact, this also connects to one of your previous questions about what have we learned from previous crises. When we actually looked at what happened in the 2008 crash, we had organizations who were coming out of it in the later years, and we were looking to see what was their connection. They said, one of the biggest challenges, and in fact, this is one of the biggest reasons organizations tell us they don't do planned giving, is that it's deferred money and we need cash now. Well, all of a sudden, we're not in a cash environment. In fact, we're not even in a securities environment that the market is going through such a challenge. And major gift and cash conversations are off the table. And this is the time for us to be able to double down on the bequest, on that deferred conversation. But let me share. This is step 2. Step 1 is the fact that we don't actually control a lot of bequest conversations. Those are conversations between the donor and their advisor. And so their advisors are the one who are creating the will, creating the estate plan, and they're out there looking for the wording, the legal title, the charitable registration number, designation information, and where do they go for that? They go to your website. So actually, step 1, right now, forget about solicitation and people wondering about should we go out and what's the appropriate context, etc. Right now, you need to make sure that your information is tight on your website, that your fundraising team know what to do if a lawyer or a donor asks. This is the time where those check boxes and frankly, all those leads that were saying, I want to talk about bequests or planned giving, they've already asked you. So it's time to make sure that your website is showed up, your planned giving material is available, and that, yes, it's time to be able to have those deferred conversations, which again, I will say it again, are active stewardship conversations. You can't have cash and deferred is the time. Again, we're out there. We've got a webinar next week where we've got 2 legacy marketing experts from both coasts, from BC, from Ontario, sharing how do we do this nuanced marketing at this challenging time. But I've got to tell you, when Canadians think of their mortality, they make a will. So you just need to make sure that step 1, your organization is ready to be there should they choose you. That's the web, and that's, again, doubling down, reaching out even to those advisors, those estate lawyers in your community right now who, frankly, are discovering Zoom for the first time and really are ready to be in contact with you to make sure that when people think about what they care about and why, we've got to not be afraid. We've got to be bold. We worry about asking, but you are tied to the values of your donors. And again, there's some of you out there that may be kind of secondary. We've got to draw that often circle of needs. But so many organizations, especially small community organizations, right now we're doing a lot of listening to community foundations, to United Way teams who do this community listening. People are thinking about local, and in times of crisis, they think about hyper-local. What's going on in my community and the needs? You just need to make sure you're ready to respond.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, it's had tricky times, and I'm sure tons of people will be grateful for that advice around a tough topic there. I wanted to switch gears because we have questions kind of like throughout people's fundraising programs here. And we have one, I think, Cathy, I think this might make sense for you here. So we have one that says, what do we do about our upcoming spring direct mail? Should we postpone? Is it okay to send?
Yeah, so that's certainly a conversation I actually had with a client this morning. And I think that in the vein of don't decide for your donors about how they're going to behave, I think there is some merit in considering going ahead with your direct mail campaign, but I don't think it can be a standard direct mail message. I think you have to acknowledge what's going on in the community. You have to be you have to acknowledge your link to the crisis and how you're making a difference in it. And your donors really do care, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to help. And so if you have an opportunity for people to help, then let them know about that, even if it is through donating. And as I mentioned client this morning talked about how much moral support she got from knowing that there were donors who were supporting them. That's the kind of thing you want to include in your direct mail letter. I mentioned this earlier, but be gracious. Give people an easy way to save face, even if you can't see them face to face, because this is a really difficult time. But it doesn't preclude you from asking. Don't be tone deaf. You know, if you wrote your letter months ago and have it teed up to go out, you might have to retool the message and be a little bit more current. And there are, if you're familiar with SOFI, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for. It's like outstanding fundraising things. But there is on SOFI today, there were some COVID direct mail templates for different sectors. So if you're looking for what kind of things you can say, there's some templates for you that you might be able to reach out to. And I think above all, at this time, it is about well, having the courage to be honest with your donors. Don't just default to the positive stories that we do so often. This is an opportunity for you to tell them about how this crisis is impacting the clients that you serve, and how they can help make those lives a little bit easier.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cathy. And I was off the audio and video for a while, and looks like I'm back, so I'm really excited about that. I actually wanted to stick with you, Cathy, here for a second.
Okay.
Because you're mentioning like going ahead with the direct mail, reaching out to folks. So we all know, especially, well, with change of government, I don't have to say too much, we know that people can lose funding. And organizations that were once kind of focused on government funding and are new to kind of creating a donor base and doing fundraising, they don't have a donor base, okay? So the question we have here is we're just in the beginning of building a donor base after recent government cuts, but are really in need. What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to be starting your fundraising program when you're in crisis. So, I always say to people the best time to start your fundraising program is when you don't need any fundraising revenue. But notwithstanding, if you're at a place where you don't have a donor base and you need to start fundraising, I actually think one of the things you need to do is start at a place that is the most uncomfortable for everybody, and that is having very personal conversations with prospective donors. So it's going to take you a long time to build up your direct mail program or to get traction if you're developing an online giving program. And you should be, you can be doing that kind of stuff. But if you need to hit the ground running and get some money in the door, you want to think about how you can launch what we would call a major giving program. How can you talk to people face to face and get their engagement? If they can't give financially, can they support you by helping identify other people you should be speaking with? The challenge with this for many organizations that don't have a fundraising program is that it is the most intimidating form of fundraising. You're talking to folks face to face. You risk someone saying no to you to your face. That can be really intimidating for folks. But these are extraordinary times, and people need to step up to be able to meet the times.
Awesome. That's great.
Jim,
yeah.
If I could just mention, because the part of it is everybody is also thinking that we're starting from zero, when in fact right now we've got resources out there that are so powerful. So two that I've really shared that I found so much value in for me in helping especially small organizations is specifically a paper that Cathy put out just over a month ago, talking about the ecology of fundraising and how small organizations can do that. And it was, for some small organizations, groundbreaking. It really simply broke down the methodology towards fundraising and creating what a lot of us in fundraising call a culture of giving. Wonderful paper to do that. And on the other side, we've got Cindy, whose podcast is #1 in Canada for a reason in nonprofits. And there's several different episodes. And Cindy, I wonder if you could think of any off the top of your head where Cindy actually, again, breaks down what Cathy just talked about, how organizations and, frankly, teams can get over that fear of asking to build up that very raw, new type of fundraising for so many, to go from the passive of direct mail and special events to at this time where we need to dig deep and connect with individuals. Those are the two best resources in the country right now.
Amazing. And Cindy, I want to get you in here too. I can't unmute you. You got it. Yeah. It says self-muted. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, sorry. Someone else muted me, and I couldn't unmute me until they unmuted me. There we go. I thank you both, Cathy and Paul, for already a great answer. I just want to add a couple more things because I see a lot of organizations that have really strong communities, but really small donor bases. And I think that speaks to our reluctance to ask. And so I'll give you an example of an organization I'm working with in Halifax right now. They've built this community of people we wouldn't think of as donors, right? They're not the like big name philanthropists, but when they needed to ask, they raised really significant amounts of money from a lot of smaller gifts and a few larger gifts of people they don't think of as big donors. And so while it's, I see so many organizations think, I don't know anyone who can give. And I think by saying that, we are not giving people the opportunity to give. And so for organizations that have a strong community base, but maybe you've been reluctant to fundraise because you feel like they don't have the capacity to give, or they're not traditional donors, now is the time to call on your community, to bring them into the organization and your needs. And I think if you have community but not donors, you can look at building that community into a donor base at all levels. I always say we're really good at overestimating certain people's capacity to give. So a lot of times when I speak to organizations, they'll say we want money from Oprah or from the Westins here in Toronto, or the Irvings and the East Coast. There's always those families that we think of when we think of big donors. So they get so many asks, and we always overestimate their capacity to give, and we significantly underestimate the capacity of the people around us to give. And so really thinking about how you use this as a time to tap into your community and the people who care most about the work that you're doing. And Paul, you mentioned the podcast. We absolutely have some episodes. We've had Jen Love on, shout out because I know Jen is tuning in now, talking about donor love and, going back to what everyone's mentioned around stewardship. All of those things that Jen talks about on the podcast, and we've got lots of other great content, are ways to build that community so that it's, whether you're asking now or preparing them for an ask later, or getting to a point where you're not in crisis, all of those practices of really building the relationships, treating your supporters with care, and understanding that the act of giving is meaningful to them, I think can really go a long way at this time.
Amazing.
Can I jump in for one quick thing?
You bet. And then we're going to hear from Chris here. They're calling in.
Okay, so one of the things that I find in a lot of social change, social justice, social service organizations is that there is real discomfort around money, and that you can have a fundraiser in an organization with an executive director or CEO who doesn't feel comfortable around money, and you're going to have a heck of a time really developing the culture of philanthropy that Paul talked about, and you're going to have a heck of a time getting out there and reaching out to your community. So I had a client that served an inner city, like a neighborhood improvement area in Toronto, and I kept asking them why they weren't talking to the folks who are using their services, and they're like, well, they can't afford it. And I said, you have to give them agency. When they finally, very many months later, got around to talking to those community members, they're like, why has it taken you so long to talk to us? Because we want to support you. And they weren't going to support with huge donations, but volume of small donations was going to make a difference for this organization. You know, there's a couple of resources, and I know Cindy talks about this stuff, but on my podcast, there's a great executive director who I used to work with. The title is A Reluctant Fundraiser, and I really talked about her discomfort with being part of the sort of traditional fundraising practice. And then there's another session around money mindset and how we need to shift how we're thinking about money and how our biases around money really impede our ability to raise money within our organizations.
Can I clap for that?
100%. Yeah, I'll do that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, so Chris, from your initial response, we had someone reach in. So you were talking about engaging with new sponsors. And what does that look like for potential upcoming? We might not know the date. As a reminder, we had someone bring up, what if we have a sponsor that is quoted in limbo? So maybe like they've agreed, but maybe haven't yet given the check. And then just kind of overall from that, do you have any general advice here? So general advice for sponsor relationships when sponsors are feeling such business uncertainty themselves. So that relationship as a whole.
Yeah, the sponsor limbo, sponsorship does not occur as a transaction. Cathy, you're very distracting with whatever you're doing on camera right there. So the sponsorship transaction does not occur when you get the check. The transaction happens when they sign the contract. So if a sponsor has agreed, within seconds, you have a contract in front of them for them to sign. That is the process of sponsorship. I've always said, and this is probably why, except for Laura Mountjoy, who is on this webinar, I've never had a boss who likes me, and I've never had a finance person who likes me. Cash flow is finance's problem, not yours. You get the pledge, you get the signed contract, and you move on to the next sponsor. So that you should, the chance for a limbo sponsorship should only be like minutes or a day, right? You get the agreement verbally, it's into signed contract. So if they've given you a verbal agreement, you got to get them into contract. These are not this is not the sponsor, in my opinion, to wait a couple weeks to get back to. If they said yes and they want to move forward, you got to get them to say yes. Those, in my experience, who stall the signing of a contract are not your sponsors, I'm afraid. And so the way to deal with any sponsors in limbo, if there are many of you like that who get an agreement, you wait for a check, you're treating sponsorship like a donation. That is not how we want to work with sponsors. Sponsor agrees, sign a contract, issue an invoice, and that's that, right? So they're no longer a limbo sponsor. You got to move on to find more business or new business. So if you're in that position now, now's the time to follow up. If you have a soft, yeah, I think we can do it, thanks for sending the gold, silver, bronze package, I wouldn't call that a confirmation. I wouldn't even say that that's a limbo sponsor. I would say that's probably not someone who's fully committed. So just going forward, best practice, sponsor says they're interested, you make the list of assets. You can take my template for free right on my website to build an agreement, which you will send to your lawyer first before you share with a sponsor and get their okay, and then get them to sign. Cash flow is unless you're an ED of a small org, cash flow is not your problem. It's finance's problem, with a few exceptions. You got to be out fundraising. So advice for those for sponsor relationships when companies are feeling business uncertainty. I'm going to share with you the only good news I have for any that I've been sharing. In 2008, when the philanthropic world completely fell apart, dropped by double digits, that same year, sponsorship spending in Canada went up by 12 or 13%. And then it went up. This is companies spending money on sponsorship, not corporate philanthropy, on sponsorship, the marketing discipline. Went up by double digits every single year. More than half of that was spent on cause sponsorship or charities and nonprofits. Recessions are not the time, or a recession is not the time when a company stops spending on marketing. A company that pulls back on marketing to save money is a bankrupt company in 1 quarter. That is not where companies scale back. So during the acute phase, which is what we are in, I would be shocked to find out that TD Bank, as an example, has just told everyone they cannot pay their mortgages for 6 months and then buys $1 million naming right for a peer-to-peer event. That would be a shocking scenario. I would not expect that. But after we get through this acute phase, even if we're in recession, companies need to sell products or they are in big trouble legally, ethically. They have an obligation to be profitable. So your goal is to know your audience, know what they plan to purchase, know the brands they prefer, and be able to influence them so that you can connect a company to their target audience in meaningful ways. If you can do that and you can prove that you can deliver on their outcomes, not logos on signs, but actually achieve what these companies are trying to achieve through sponsorship, then at risk of sounding hyperbolic, you have a license to print money, right? Companies need to sell products, and if you can help them do that, believe me, at least if 2008 is any indication, we should see significant investment in marketing, digital, sponsorship, whatever it is that companies do to get people to buy their products. So I don't have good news for you right now, but when the dust settles, there's a real opportunity for causes to work with companies, and companies, generally speaking, have budget. Sponsorship in Canada around $2 billion a year, and as I said, half of that is for causes. So they may be hurting, but they have a marketing budget.
Boom! I feel like going out and getting sponsors right now.
I dropped my mic if it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah. So you said when the dust settles. We have a couple questions here for the meantime. Okay, so actually, Angela, I'm going to direct 2 questions to you here. Okay, so the first one is, okay, so we've canceled our spring events already. Generally, we get a lot of in-person donations at our gala. How do I get people to switch to online? And what's the best way to get people to switch to online donations? And then also, I have another one, so you can answer them in the order that you want. But what are some of the things that in this downtime that we should be trying and testing with online?
All right. So when it comes to how to convince people to give online, it's kind of similar to what Cathy was saying. At this point, it's going to be more difficult because you haven't already got them there, but it's not impossible. I think really what we need to focus on is what makes it easy. How is this easier for them? And this is the time. If you're going to convince people to give online, this is going to be the time. So I'd focus on the benefits to them. You know, it's easy. It's you can get receipts immediately, or you can get them at the end of the year, kind of whatever works for you. All of these options are available. And P.S., you can do it in your pajamas. You don't have to talk to someone. You don't have to go to the mailbox, all of these things. But I think equally important is focusing or telling them why you need this as a charity. Both why you need it. You know, it's hard to get to the mailbox right now. But I think beyond that, there's benefits for many charities to collecting their donations online. Depending on the tool you use, the receipting is taken care of for you. All of those things. So whatever you can help. Think about your donor, but your donor also cares about you. So focus on the benefits that are important to you in terms of how to get people online or donating online. The hardest part, I think, is going to be reaching out to those donors you don't already have an email address for, and those sorts of things. So you're going to have to be creative if you don't have an email address. You're going to have to push them that way through a piece of DM. You're going to have to call them. You're going to have to push them online that way. That's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge. But really, I think donors are primed now more than ever to give online a try. So that would be actually the first thing I would be telling charities to do at this time if they're not already doing that. In terms of what else they can be doing, I think there's always things you can test, and there's always things you can try. You can try the latest, interesting, cool thing. Like I said, even on social, you can live stream, you can create a Twitter chat, depending on the age of who you're using. You might want to try something targeted to younger donors, older donors. The sky's the limit. But I'm going to pull it back a little bit. And I think that the places we need to focus on are a couple of core pieces of digital fundraising and digital marketing. And I'd say that's making sure you're tracking everything. If you don't already have Google Analytics set up, this is the time to be doing it. Again, more and more people are going online. You need to understand them. You absolutely need to make sure you can track them. You need to understand where they fall off. You need to understand the pages and the places that they're coming from. If you don't have Google Analytics set up, there's a lot of resources out there. Canada Helps has some resources, but really there's all kinds of courses you can take, online courses you can take. Some of them are free to get this set up. I really, really can't stress that enough. Beyond that, I mean, another thing is making sure your donors can find you. If you're not already, if you haven't been paying attention to search engine optimization, if you haven't been paying attention to making sure you're the first charity or one of the first couple of charities that shows up when someone Googles your cause or Googles your name, this is the time, again, to focus on that. There's a lot of resources out there. A lot of it is focused on content. A lot of it is focused on making sure you have the right words on the right pages. And again, there's some really easy things you could do to get started on that. Canada Helps hosted a webinar not that long ago. I think it was about a month ago with some tips to get started. But again, I'd take this time, especially if you're slowing down your comms or especially if you're going to not ask as often, to get some of these things in place, because they're going to help you both through this challenging time as well as when things start to pick up again. You want to be ready for your donors when they're back to giving.
Awesome. And Paul, I wanted to loop you in. I know you got a comment to say, but on top of that, I'd like to get your opinion on this. So Angela did some great points talking about the benefits of the donor to convert online. I know we have a ton of faith-based organizations and churches in the room right now, and I'd just like to know, what are your thoughts on that in the church? How can we get people to convert when there's no mass happening right now in a lot of places?
So that was going to be my comment. You know, this is exactly what's going on. I know we've got a lot of colleagues from faith-based institutions. I've represented one of Canada's largest groups of churches in the country. You know, I'm actually on the board of a digital church charity that actually helped the services go from TV to online to YouTube, that has now become the primary vehicle for more than 1/4 of all of Canada's churches. And they resisted digital for so long, and now we live in a digital world. This is a real challenge because we're also in one of the holiest seasons of the year with Advent and Easter coming up. A lot of faith-based institutions did not invest in this space. And as Angela said, you know, we don't share enough, actually. Canada Helps was born in a church pew, right? It was because we didn't have a digital basket, and organizations, again, it's about community. So right now, I know a lot of churches don't have email lists. They didn't do that before. It isn't part of the culture. Everybody was still reading church bulletins. So now is the time. And in fact, now is the opportunity to convert into this digital ecosystem. Your parishioners are still looking for the bulletin. Where are they going? They're going to your website. So everybody's got a marketing person sitting somewhere in the pew. Talk to them about conversion. Talk to them about how do we get them from the bulletin to email addresses to one community, because again, they're needing you in community, but absolutely they're used to the basket. So getting online giving set up, again, as Angela said, monthly giving is part of that culture, is part of that giving, pre-authorized bank debit, all of that. For those faith-based communities, people need that cadence of actually spiritual stewardship. People need to get back to that. People want to get back to normal so badly. So step one, connect to community. Step two, make sure you've built the platform for people to give in that context. They need a digital basket.
Amazing.
Can I pipe in?
Of course, yeah.
Just to further on that, so 2 points. One is I highly recommend this book, See You on the Internet. It's like really, really foundational, all the things that Angela and Paul mentioned. That's just my personal favorite. The other thing is, Paul mentioned email lists, and so many organizations like, we don't have an email address for our donors. Now is actually a really good time to do some list building. One of my favorite resources for that is a woman named Amy Porterfield. She has a website, some free resources, a podcast, all about list building, or mostly about list building. And really, you want to look at how you can serve your community right now by offering them something in exchange for their email address. And I've been having a lot of these conversations with organizations. So how do you you're not asking for money, you're just building up that base, and how do you communicate with them on a regular basis by offering? So I'm a parent. I don't know if any of you saw my little one running around in the background. I am desperate for resources that I can take right now to help us not go completely bonkers over the next however many weeks we are stuck at home. So if an organization is in the space of, well, I'll give an example of Future Possibilities for Kids, one of our clients, they put out a resource for people. So just make it that they have, whether you use MailChimp or anything else, put in a form where they have to give their email address in exchange for it. And now you are building that base. You are building that community. They're self-selecting because you're offering something that's relevant to the work that you do and gives them something that they need. And so it's a really good time to do that. And then once you have that email address, communicate with them on a regular basis. Tell the stories. Share other things that people can do right now in a time of crisis. If they're not ready to give, what are other things that they can do and that you can do with them virtually or what have you, so that they start to feel part of your organization. So I actually think that that is one of the biggest opportunities that organizations can take advantage of right now, especially if you can tap into the very basic needs that people are displaying right now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cindy. I want to be respectful and mindful of everyone's time. We've hit 4:30. I personally just wanted to thank all of our guests today, our panelists, that was like jam-packed with value, like all over the fundraising spectrum. So I know we have a ton of people asking, is there going to be a recording? Yes, we're going to send the recording of this so you can take those notes and revisit things that you might have missed. Wondering, did everyone want to just kind of give a last parting word? Maybe a 10 or 15 seconds, say goodbye and parting words to everyone. We could go in order. We can go, we might have different orders, but I'm going to ask Cindy first just to kind of sign off for us here.
I'm going to end with a big thank you. Now is hard for all of us, and now is the time when I'm going to reference what Cathy said again, like when we have to step up and step forward, but being super aware that your work is hard. These are hard times, and this thank you for persisting and pushing through and doing the amazing work that you do. This is why I love our sector so much, because everyone is on the front lines of critical or change-making work. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Paul?
Well, on behalf of CAGP, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, we've got 20 chapters across the country. And, it's all about community. So please connect into your local community. We're here to help. And of course, as always, I'm here to help. LinkedIn is my actual place of residence, not this box. So have folks. And yeah, if we connect, there's nothing we can't do.
Cathy?
What I really want to do is tell you what my Auntie Betty would tell you right now, but it's a bit crude. So I'm going to send you to the video where I talk about it, because Mom and Auntie Betty would be tickled pink to know that they're being talked about online. And somebody asked where to find the Enabling Ecology article, and it's at fundraisinglab.ca, and you'll see a video. Wait till the end and listen to it. And that's what I'm telling you. I'm channeling Auntie Betty right now. Kaipu is what it the syllables. What is that? What's that called? The acronym for it.
Acronym.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cathy. Angela?
It's picking up off something Cindy said, and I think right now, why we're all here is we're really just trying to offer value, and I think that's the same thing that I think the charities out there can be looking to do. Maybe it's not the right time to ask, but you can
you can offer value, whether it's just comforting words, whether it's reaching out and talking to someone. I've seen some people say, just call people up and chat, call people up and tell them you're thinking about them. And so whether you're offering some kind of learning resource like Future Possibilities for Kids, or whether you're offering some kind of pre-recorded or live music event if you're a music charity, I think there's things we can be doing in these really difficult times, even if it's not necessarily fundraising related, that we can offer value to our supporters and kind of deepen those relationships. Help offer some value.
And Mr. Mike Drop Chris.
Well, I'll say this. I spent probably 5 business days worried about the conversations I was going to have with my corporate partners, and 4 hours talking to every single partner, several of them on behalf of my clients. And in that 4 hours, I was able to reassure myself, reassure my partners, and learn a lot about why they work with us. And so I wasted 4 full days on anxiety and stress during an anxious and stressful time. And it was all resolved in just a couple of hours. So my advice, you've probably watched all the news you need. Watch the press conferences from the premiers and the prime minister. I'm not suggesting you skip those, but I think it would do you some good to turn off the news for a couple of hours and just call the people, whether you're their donors or corporate partners. Pick the 10 most important to you, however you define that. Have a conversation with them and let them know you're working on a plan. And believe me, you will feel so much better after doing that than watching the COVID case rise on Twitter. So stop. It's natural for us to build things up in our minds when we want to avoid them, but it's just so much easier to do it.
Amazing. I want to give a round of applause for these 5 beautiful people here. I want to send a bunch of love to everyone out there. Health, strength, and love. Love all you guys. Really appreciate all you guys do. If you guys want to continue the conversation, again, we have that Facebook group, Canadian Charities Connect. There's tons. My mind is going crazy, and I'm sure you guys all want to unpack that together. So you can connect there and on Twitter as well. If you need help from Canada Helps, you can reach out to us. We're here. We're all working remotely. Bunch of people in quarantine, including me, but we're still here to help. And lastly, and most importantly, all of you guys that came here today, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for the time to be here today. We all appreciate you so much, and that's why this group came together, is to be in service of you. So thanks, guys. Signing off.